think we're live.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Senate Institutions. Today is June 9th. We are here to talk about certain segments in the Capitol bill, which is Bill H-955. I'm going to begin with Representative Kurt Taylor, who contacted me first about a provision that he has in the bill. Al Cormier, I see, has joined us. So Al, at some point in the very near future, I'm going to ask you to comment on this as well, because your name came into the picture first about this particular provision and a date that had your being responsible for getting a report back to us. And the initial question was, are you going to be able to make that date? We'll talk about that in a second. But Representative Taylor, how about if you just give us a brief synopsis of the provision that you have in the Capitol bill?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to provide further information. This is section 22 of H-955. It's page 20 out of 27 in the version that I have. It's well known and accepted that the Chittenden County Correctional Facility Regional Correctional Facility in South Burlington is expensive, aging facility with inadequate programming space and an architecture that's out of step with contemporary approaches to women in corrections. Both the facilities report that came in January of 2017 and that 850 bed proposal in February of 2019, both of those recommended closing the women's facility. One of the principal roadblocks to its replacement has been an inability to determine the bed count for a new facility. Some argue that the current population is the best determinant of the new facility size. Others argue that more women could be released to community supports, and there's no need for such a large facility. James Baker, our current interim commissioner of DOC, has repeatedly stated that Vermont does not currently have the kind of community supports needed to supervise and service the type of offenders we are releasing to community supervision. Too many return to prison on furlough violations. House Corrections and Institutions heard from at least one community-based organization that they do not have the resources to deal with the complex, higher risk offenders they're being asked to supervise and service. So Section 22 proposes considering a new DOC-managed women's reentry facility as a transition from CRCF to the community. It's to consider the idea. This would be similar to a facility in Windham, Maine, operated by Maine's Correctional Department that both myself and another member of Corrections, House Corrections, visited. A first step in that consideration is to determine how many women there are at CRCF who are not ready for release to the community, but do not need such expensive physical security, such as constant observation, razor wire fences, cement walls, barred windows, sally ports, etc. So we look at that population, get a number for those that might not require that level of security. The study would also determine the number of women receiving community-based services that would benefit from additional security and availability of services at a DOC-managed reentry facility. The idea there is there's women now in community-based services that would really be better in something that's in between CRCF and the community. Not as structured as CRCF, but not as loose as a community-based organization. Such a new facility would be far cheaper to build and operate than a replacement prison. CRCF's population would be reduced to a minimum, only those that really require that strong physical barriers as well as the close supervision. Women at a new facility would have the advantage of a structured living arrangement. It would be a DOC run, it would be very structured. They'd have easy access to jobs and programming. Community-based organizations would have a relief valve for which they are, for those that they are unable to handle, that are unable to handle the degree of freedom and responsibility that they currently have if they're in the community. So we have a relief valve for the community service to say, this person really can't make it in the community. We need to put them back into a reentry, not all the way to CRCF, but something in between. Section 22 requires an interim report by October 15th of this year. That's not really the full thing. It's just an interim report saying we're having this difficulty, we're able to progress. It's kind of a check-in. The final report isn't due until December 15th of this year. My hope is that this proposal will inform a renewed discussion of Vermont's correctional facilities and how they can conform to I hate to use these words, but they're the only ones I have, data-driven, evidence-based practices with better outcomes and reduced costs. That's what we're kind of looking for. That's what Justice Reinvestment 2 is looking for. And that's what I think we need facilities to support. So I want to thank you for your time. I'm happy to provide additional information about Maine's facility and about the background for this facility. That's
So Kurt, I'm going to jump right in and ask, since I serve on Senate Judiciary Committee, Justice Reinvestment 2 is embodied in S338, which has similar language to this contained in it. It may be exactly the same language. One of the problems between our respective committees is your committee deals with judiciary policy. My committee does not. We deal with the brick and mortar. One of the concerns I've got, frankly, is bringing this language into the Capitol bill at the same time judiciary is dealing with it. And by the way, that we are dealing with it tomorrow of all time. So we're going to be dealing with this tomorrow. And my concern is if we decide on the Judiciary Committee to come up with some kind of changes, even if it's simply the dates, and then we have conflict between the two pieces of legislation, I'm a little bit concerned about trying to do it twice. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I understand. 338, which we're working with too, over there in the House, doesn't really focus on a bed count in facilities. It doesn't. It looks at the policy and how changing the statutes might influence the number of people going into community-based services, but it doesn't talk about this kind of melding to create an actual facility and get a bed count. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to find the data to actually come up with a count of people who might fit into a certain facility. And 338 doesn't deal with that. Its studies do look into statute changes and how they're being worked through, the ones that we're putting in now, how they'll follow through and overseeing them and collecting data for how those work out. But it doesn't look at facilities, I don't think, at all.
Okay. Al Cormier, I'd like to jump to you. There's two reports that are due. One's an interim in October, the final one in December. That's a very important question that ought to be asked of you, but my first priority after getting you to unmute yourself is to figure out what kind of guitars you have on the wall behind you.
One is a Taylor GS Mini and a Koa, and a Epiphone Les Paul behind that. The big pair over here in the corner, though.
I just want you to know, Al,
Ah,
you don't beat a 1965 Fender Telecaster.
no, you don't. You don't. That's on my wish list. The Telecaster.
I was concerned. I thought that was a Martin hanging on the wall behind you. Then I would have been a little scared, but
No, the Taylor. I'm the Taylor guy. I like the Taylor. So.
okay.
Is this an item in the bill?
Do you have a
We'll work
price
it
on
in.
yours? Al might be interested.
Al, I need to know, I know you guys are under the gun for a lot of different things right now. And I heard these two report dates that were due, and we started to question that on our own in our committee the other day. So I'd like to hear your response and your ability to meet that time frame.
So we would be asking for an extension if at all possible, but my question is, given where COVID is and where we're at with our facilities right now, and being so far out of normal operations. But my question back to Representative Taylor is around the DSC feasibility study that's currently being completed. Well, it hasn't been completed, but the bid process on that closed. We reviewed the bids with a BGS team, myself, Deputy Commissioner Henkin, and that feasibility study, which came out of joint justice oversight last year, is requesting that exact data. It's looking at the bed counts. It's looking at modeling going ahead for the department, modeling what our population increases may be, decreases may be, what the population may look like going down the road. This feasibility study is to essentially look at replacements for both CRCF and Northwest State Facility in St. Albans. So all of that data that Representative Taylor is looking for will be included in that feasibility study, along with design and proposals for getting rid of both of those facilities to one, what we're looking for is a campus style facility.
You know, at the top of your head, when that is due, the feasibility study?
There was an extension on, it was originally due March. So there's been an extension on that. I know that we had selected a bidder. There were 4 bidders that submitted proposals for that feasibility study. A bidder was selected. Joe Asia was in the process of writing up the proposal to Commissioner Cole with the bid committees or the selection committee's pick for that bidder. I think if I had to think, I think it was a January 21 deadline on that one.
Yeah, I think I have the answer to that. The final draft, the final report is due December 23rd of 2020.
Hal, are
I
you
think-
by any chance testifying in front of the Senate Judiciary tomorrow?
I am not.
Okay.
Not scheduled to anyway.
Committee, any questions?
Can I just say a word too about can I add something there?
Yeah, you can, but you're intruding pretty soon on Mary's ability to speak here.
I understand. It'll only take a second. No, I followed the RFP that Al's talking about, and I really support it. I think it's great. And I'd like to see it progress. And I think there is a good bit of overlap there. He's correct. The only thing is that I want to get the community-based side into that count, not just the facilities. And I want to assure that the changes proposed by Justice Reinvestment 2 would be incorporated in forming those counts. And I think the RFP will probably do that. But the idea of a reentry facility that's completely a new type of facility, I don't know whether the RFP will get into that kind of a discussion so much as how do we replace the existing facilities we have? And that's why that's why I'm putting this one in here.
Yeah.
That RFP does do a lot of very good work in this direction. So,
Okay. We are going to have a discussion, just so you know, on the entire bill Friday. My hope, frankly, is to try to take a vote, if at all possible, on the bill, because we've been following Kurt, your committee's testimony the entire time that we've been in this session, because we knew you guys were going to screw up and dump it on us the last week. So we made sure we heard all of the witnesses first. So just beware that we may have a conversation and we may make decisions then about what to do. Okay. Thank you very much for
Okay.
coming. Alan, you got anything else you needed to tell us?
no, thanks. I'm done.
Okay. Al, anything
for-
further?
For clarity's sake, are we getting an extension on this report, or are we gonna just meld it into,
I think that's one thing the committee is going to have to discuss. If you had your druthers, what would your extension request be?
I would look for at least March of 21.
Okay, and you're already involved in the feasibility study.
Yes. And I think based going back to what Representative Taylor said, with what's involved in 338 and things we're working on with reports for that, in conjunction with the feasibility study, I think a lot of that may meld together and give us a lot of that information for what he's looking.
Okay. Thanks for coming.
All right, thank you.
Mary, you're up.
First of all, I really want to thank you very much for having me. This little piece of the bill is near and dear to my heart. Phil became a very close friend of mine throughout the decades. I moved back up to Vermont over 30 years ago and got to know him really well. But I also knew him when I was a college student. And I found him one of the most remarkable visionary people I knew, a real agent for change. And from what I've heard, he really knew how to work across the aisle in a very collaborative way to really help Vermonters. And as I see Aiken Ave, and Dean Davis Ave coming up to the State House, those are two other really visionary governors. And I thought, what a nice addition to add 133 State Street. We're not taking a name away from anybody else. We're just taking a name that doesn't really have much of a name now and giving it to one of our incredible governors. I think you can see from the bill that I introduced that it definitely has a lot of support, and it has bipartisan support. And it wasn't that the Institutions Committee opposed it. They just, I don't know, didn't quite get to it to the point where they could just include it in the bill. And the reason I decided that it wasn't really okay to wait till next year, Joan Hoff, who was really truly Phil's partner in life, partner in politics, every step of the way, she's getting elderly. She's getting frail. And I would like to see her be able to enjoy knowing that this has happened and actually maybe even attend the event, the renaming event. And that's why I feel that there is a little pressure of time.
So did the House not deal with this at all?
They didn't. What happened was, and I'm not quite sure how this came about. Somebody didn't like the naming of buildings. I don't know, that they should stick with streets, and then thought Baldwin Street was a good idea. And then found out kind of at the last minute that I was really a fan of naming the building. So that along with those other two streets, you could see the sign. Baldwin is not exactly what you pass by when you're driving through Montpelier. So according to the member from Montpelier, Mary Hooper, the former mayor, the Baldwin family is actually a well-recognized and I guess loved family in Montpelier. And she said that that just was not a good idea. And she highly recommended that we go back to naming the building. At this point, the bill is coming to the floor the next day. And it just simply seemed to be too late at that point.
What was it?
Go ahead, Dick.
What would be the name of? What would you change it? Phil Hoff Drive, or what would you name it?
I don't know. I'm not even sure it got far enough to know exactly what it would have been named. But
so what this began back in probably February. I learned about this, and the original plan was to name the street, rename the street, but as a result of municipal concerns about that, I understood that you were moving to rename 133 State Street.
Yes,
as
and
the
that
Governor
is the
Hoff building.
That's right. And that's the bill that I had introduced with a good list of co-sponsors. And I found out, I don't know whether I just forgot this or what, but Representative Hooper had also introduced a bill the previous year. And she had her own list of sponsors. And as a Montpelier resident, she was adamant that it be the building and not the street.
So there's no language anywhere right now that's passed the House. You still have a bill out there somewhere, and you're
Yes.
putting in a request at this point in time for us to add some language to the capital bill in order for that to happen.
That's right, yes.
Can we do that, Mr. Chair?
I don't know the answer to that, but given that we are really pressed for time, I'm going to make this suggestion. Mary, if you would work with Ledge Counsel, Becky Wasserman, to present some kind of language I see a couple of my committee members are already raising their hands. My thought was to simply get the language in front of us. We could discuss it on Friday and decide whether we want to put it in the bill or not. I don't know whether we have the power to do that or what kind of flack would be created. And maybe one of my, no, Eric is back on with us now. So Eric, before you want to talk about your Fender Telecaster, what do we have for obstacles in the way of this?
I'm pretty sure we had language renaming the courthouse in last year's bill, right? That wasn't a separate
Yes, we did.
bill.
Yes, yep.
So,
Oops.
So,
Mr. Chair,
Okay, I've got two senators looking to speak. Senator Hooker was up
Um,
first.
yeah, Becky has drafted some language and added it to the bill that included the courthouse last year. So added it to the statute, or would be added to the statute.
Okay, I don't remember that happening, but I'll believe you. Senator
It just, she
Lyons.
just drafted it. She just drafted it. We
it's-
haven't.
Okay.
added it.
Senator
let me,
Lyons.
yeah, so first of all, thank you for taking this up. I think this is a very important, I think it's an important honor that we should consider for Governor Hoff. He was always a very welcoming and supportive person in all of our communities, and in particular with those of us who were in politics, and his wife continues to provide support. Senator Hooker and I did talk about this issue after Representative Sullivan approached me about it. And we did ask Becky Wasserman to put together potential language. So we do have that. And we can, I think Becky can probably bring it in for us to look at on Friday.
Okay, Peggy Delaney, are you
so I
still
think-
on with us?
Yes, I am.
Could you ask Becky to present the language to us in advance, and then we'll have Becky come in and explain that on Friday?
Language in advance. Yep. About renaming. Yep.
Yes.
Yep,
Senator
will do.
Mazza.
I go back to it, not that I'm opposed to, I just go back to, if it's not in either bill, do we have the jurisdiction to put some language in that does not have involved in either bill? I guess that's my question.
Well, it's not a
It-
conference committee yet.
Right.
Uh,
One of the other things I will do is hook up with my counterpart in the other body and find out if there's any kind of flack or resistance about this. Mayor, I just want you to know we're all feeling very pressed for time and trying to get the bill out.
I understand that.
So we'll do what we possibly can.
Okay,
Um,
would you allow me to make just one quick thing that I overlooked? One quick,
Sure.
the reason 133 State Street was looked at is the governor created the Capitol Complex, and we believe that that was the first building that was brought into the Capitol Complex after he created it.
Did you say that you met him in your college days? The governor?
Did I meet him
Did
in
you
my
say
college?
that you met him during your college days?
I did, yeah.
I worked on his first campaign.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
No,
wow.
I'm talking to Mary, and Mary, the coincidence, Mary, is kind of strange. I was the guest speaker, or the student speaker rather, at my college graduation. And it turns out that he was the guest speaker. So we sat on stage, and that's how I first met him.
Fabulous.
I bought a
Hey,
school
buddy.
bus back. I bought a school bus back when he was running for office, and I painted it the Halfway Express. And I campaigned all over Chittenden County. I had it written on the side, or I painted the bus red, white, and blue, the Halfway Express.
You started it all. I nobody
that's
probably had buses before that. That's
That's
amazing.
right.
Yeah, no, seriously.
You know how he got in? There was a proposal by Keiser to get rid of the state college system, and that's what led to Keiser's downfall. That is a true story. The Republicans
is.
got divided right down the middle, and that's how Phil Hoff walked in the door.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay, we'll take a look on Friday and I'll talk with my counterpart to see if there's any flack there. If there is flack there, obviously, that may cause us a hesitancy to try to do this at the same time.
Understood. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate this.
Okay, thanks for coming.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Let's see. Abby Willard is who oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll take that back. Ken Craig could not be with us today. John Patry is here as the Military Operations Manager. And a question was raised, I believe by Senator Mazza the other day. Your allotment went from 800,000 up to 1.4 million. And the question was, what is the increase all about?
In particular, those are two specific projects. One is a latrine addition to the Virgins Armory that has kind of peaked significance because of a change of stationing that increased the female population at that armory, which was 1950s vintage, never made provision for very much female population there. And was also, I'd say, accoutered to the 1950s vintage also. So the rehabilitation and addition to that facility, in addition to the final phase of Bennington Armory PCB mitigation, which will then allow us to turn it over to the town. So those two projects, one added, I have the documents that I shared there. One added 295,000. That was the Bennington project. That's the state's share of 50-50 project. And then is the 325,000 is the 25% share of the Virgins project.
It's $1 million project in Virgins.
Yes, yeah.
What are you doing for $1 million?
It's building a new latrine.
Yeah, well, bathrooms are always the most expensive if you've ever done modifications to your facility.
$1 million, a lot of money. I'm trying to figure this out.
Here, Mike Blow here. I'm the Construction and Facilities Management Officer on the federal side. So in addition to, it's an addition, everything is being converted to ADA compliance in the facility. I believe there's a new fire alarm system.
Yeah.
So it's more than just the bathroom addition, which is necessary just because of the increase in female population. It sounds expensive. It is expensive, but the feds are picking up 75%.
Senator Lyons.
So it does sound expensive, and I've been through the Virgins Armory, and it's single story, not adding a story. It doesn't seem to have a need for new ramps or anything, but it's security and bathroom. Is it a new bathroom totally?
It's a new bathroom totally.
Oh,
In addition to the new facility, the new bathroom facilities for the male and female, we're required to add a lactation room and a gender neutral facility. So.
and so when you're talking about the lactation room, it has to be a permanent structure. I know that there's a company that provides for, I would call them temporary structures, but they're structures that are sold to airports for that purpose. Are you?
Yes, ma'am. If the state wanted to pay for that holding with no federal share, we could do that.
Okay,
Federal government's not going to buy temporary facilities.
gotcha.
What's the Bennington deal? What's the Bennington project?
PCB mitigation, and that facilitates disposing of that facility to the town in exchange for the property that we plan to build the new facility on. The new facility is a $14.8 million appropriation on the federal side with 100% construction, but the state has to provide the land to build it.
The
So-
state has
And you have to
negotiated- the state has negotiated a deal with the town of Bennington. The town of Bennington had land available for us to construct a building, and we want to divest the Bennington Armory, the 1924 Armory. In order for us to be out of that armory, we need to mitigate the PCB issues, which this is our third year, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah.
Third year of work on that, and this is the final piece.
What's it mean? Break that down for me. What do you say, ABC? What is it?
PBC, it's
PC,
poly.
yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's,
Polychlorinated biphenyl.
thank
There-
you.
Thank you.
It's a bad chemical.
The EPA,
Yeah.
the Environmental Protection Agency has directed us to mitigate the PCBs in that building.
So you're gonna bring that building up to speed to get rid of the PCPs, and then you're gonna get a swap for land?
That's correct.
How much land are we talking about, and what are you gonna do with it?
16 acres, and we're building a $14.8 million new armory there. It's right next to the high school. And there is no state share required for this new armory because it was a mission change for the Guard. So whenever there's a mission change, that significantly increases either the space requirements or storage requirements, then the federal government picks up 100% of it. So it will be a new facility in Bennington. The building there does not meet any requirements for the current operational forces in the National Guard. It has a wooden basketball floor.
Beautiful
no-
building.
It's a beautiful building, but they have to manually carry stuff up and down stairs, and it's not conducive to operations today. It's
You don't
Sounds
make
like it-
soldiers do that anymore?
some of the stuff. It's a
Yeah.
0.6 acre lot.
Yeah.
The
And-
National
Sounds like a
Guard,
good-
the
Sounds like a
National
good
Guard,
deal. Sounds like a good deal for Dick Sears again.
I was gonna say, there better be a federal requirement that no armory buildings are named after sitting senators, because I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
Will this new facility be a multi-story or single story?
it will be a 2-story.
I would think
So
Bennington
it'll
would
have an L.
I would think it would be benefit to Bennington.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
I would think it'd be a great benefit to Bennington to have.
Oh,
a-
I
Yes.
agree. Yeah.
But it sounds like they want a lot in return also.
Yeah, the current armory is directly across the little Franklin Avenue or Franklin Place from the current town offices. So as a municipal facility, it really fits best for them to end up with it. There's lots of excess space in the town. We did have both the land and the property appraised for fair market value. So they're both equal in current status. One, a building with PCBs that will require, I guess, monitoring forever. And another property of 16 acres rather than 0.6 acres that's suitable for our needs, that'll fit a building that is about 2 times the size of the existing building. So.
The current requirement for that unit that's stationed in Bennington is about a 42,000 square foot facility. And the Bennington Armory that exists now is 18,000.
Right.
Hopefully it's that new building you're gonna put in is not in the watershed of all the other problems that they've got down there.
It's It's in an area that has been filled. And I think the flood has been mitigated. Any issues with flood?
The elevation of the site has been raised by 10 feet where they, I don't know if you're familiar with the Bennington area, that where the Agency of Transportation facility is in the industrial park.
Yep.
That's near the river, where they broadened the river and took all that riverbed and put it onto this piece of property. So we're going to build on top of that. Even though in Irene, the flood that flooded Bennington, it still didn't flood this piece of property. So we're fairly confident that in our the 100-year or whatever Irene was termed, the 250-year storm, this site was safe. So.
Yeah, I know a little bit about the town. They named it after me. So.
Yeah. I wasn't going to say that. I can't, you might have to recuse yourself.
Can be done. Committee, any other questions?
No, no. This is
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. You've answered our questions.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you showing up today.
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
I'm going to move on to Cindy Locke from VAST, if she's still with us.
Hello, I'm right here.
Good
She
afternoon.
went for a hike. She went for a hike on the trail.
A little soggy today, Senator.
Cindy, when you last spoke to us, I think you were still looking at a more lengthy project. And since then, strategies and funds have been found, and some determination was made to move from, I believe it was a 4-year project down to a 2-year project. And I'd just like you to quickly bring us up to speed on how that happened. And then we'll talk a little bit about the money question.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. For the record, my name is Cindy Locke. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Association of Snow Travelers, known as VAST. So your question, Senator, is a great one. We're very happy that it's been accelerated to the point that AOT thinks that they can get the work done in 2 years. I was listening on Friday when you asked your questions as well, and when the others testified. And so we have been working closely with AOT and with those involved with designing the project to get done in 2 years. So we're very confident in their ability to do that, and it's incredibly exciting news. We haven't announced anything officially to communities, of course, because that's really up to you all and the Agency of Transportation to let us know when something like that happens. But boy, I'll tell you what, this is exciting news for Vermont. This is a world-class trail, and when it's completed, what it's going to do for the communities. Right now with what we're going through with, even before COVID-19, but now what we're going through, as you all, I'm sure, experience the amount of people that are out recreating just to get fresh air close to home, and having the ability to have access to a trail like that is very impressive. So we've been working right alongside with AOT, supplying any information that they need from us and getting updates from them. And work is still going on, as Michelle and as the others told you on Friday. So the Hardwick project and work in what we called 1C, which is up in the Swanton area, has all been permitted. So that's work that will happen this summer. And so the plans are moving forward. So while the work is being done this summer, the plan is to then permit the other sections and get those done. Because generally that takes 6 months to a year just to get the permits.
So you were listening last Friday. Did you sense any form of bias on behalf of our committee as to how this should be funded?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I feel very supported by your committee. Our entire organization does. The community that uses the LVRT does. We feel very supported by the Agency of Transportation and Forest Parks and Recreation. So it was a joyous moment. And in fact, while Michelle was testifying or taking breaks in between a couple of times, I texted her. I was driving and I pulled over and I said, "You can let them know if you want, I'm listening and I'm happy to testify." And yeah, just thankful to all of you for your support, and just so happy to answer any questions you have at any time.
It will
There
be
is a
not
provi-
called, it's not
I'm
gonna
sorry,
be
go
called the
ahead.
Joe Benning Trail, okay?
Well,
Yeah.
that brings me back to what you were just talking about, because years ago, we talked about the possibility of renaming this trail, and we were told that you're not allowed to name a state entity. So I was curious to your conversation earlier about the road and the buildings. I'm
Used
sure
to be a library used to do
you have the
that.
power to do that, you
Right.
know, but
I was told once by my mentor a long time ago that you never name anything after someone who is still alive. And I said, why is that? He said, do you know how many Richard Nixon libraries there are right now?
well, we thought about Ernie Pomelo, because he always liked things,
Yeah.
named after him. But anyway.
There's a requirement for an MOU to be put out there between several entities, and I'm trying to figure out, is there some pushback on your part for having to have the state step in and declare this to be a linear state park?
No, not whatsoever. We have an MOU right now. We have a lease with the state of Vermont that's a 30-year lease, and we're 3 years into it. So we have 27 years left on our lease to maintain the trail. And so if they're going to turn it into a state park, that would release us from that at that time, I would assume. But what I'm getting at is we have gone into designing and working and building this trail and knowing that we would have to have some skin in the game for even longer than what's being proposed now. So we, while we are very careful with our money, we are very supportive to the idea of turning it into a state park, because the forest park, the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation actually has a volunteer team, has the infrastructure to manage something like that AOT doesn't. Right now in the MOU and the contract that we have, the lease that we have with the state of Vermont, they, as Michelle alluded to on Friday, they take care of all of any sort of heavy duty maintenance, catastrophic. So the type of maintenance we do now is year round. It's not just in the winter time, which was sort of alluded to on Friday. We do year round maintenance on all of our trail system. It's about 5,000 miles of trails, and we spend up to $500,000 a year on maintaining those trails. And that includes the LVRT. So routine maintenance is debrushing, trees that have fallen down, or resurfacing with the SurePack that's on the finished sections.
Okay,
So we're very supportive.
Good. Committee, any other questions?
I don't have any questions. I just, thanks for the work that you've been doing on the trail. I know how important this trail is to the northern part of the state, and many of us use it a lot. I do have a question though. What would happen if we put in place some kind of a contest to name the trail?
I think that's a
No,
great
no,
idea.
well, let's not go there.
You don't
I
want
mean,
to do that.
I actually
Well, see,
thought
now
of naming it-
Cindy agrees with me.
What's wrong with the Lamoille County Trail? What's wrong with that name?
it's the Lamoille
Valley.
Valley Rail Trail.
Yeah,
Because most of it falls, well, about half of it
right.
falls near the Lamoille River, but that was the name of the railroad. But I actually thought of the Cross Vermont Trail, and then I realized that name was already taken.
It's already taken, yeah. Well, okay,
All
I'll
right.
withdraw my suggestion for the time being.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your incredible support and leadership. Really, just thank you so much.
Hope it works out for you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Take
Thanks
care.
for coming. Abby Willard, if you're out there, I don't see you yet. There you are.
Good afternoon.
Hi. We had an issue come up. We're always looking to figure out where we are with this COVID-19 situation. And the question was raised, is the Big E on for this year? Which is why you've been invited to explain the answer to that question.
Well, thank you, Senator.
Welcome.
So Abby Willard, Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and Lauren Masseria is also here, who manages the Big E as well as many of our marketing programs. So if there's specific questions, Lauren might be helpful as well. So as far as we know, the Big E is still on for 2020. So it's scheduled to be September 18th through October 4th for those 17 days. And the word so far is that the event will still occur.
So what happens if our governor says, we're not going to open our building, and Massachusetts says, we're on?
Yeah, so NIASDA met yesterday, so Northeast Association of State Departments of Agriculture, and they did talk about this briefly, acknowledging that all 6 New England states are quite anxious about the building being open for a variety of reasons. It was rumored, and I don't know if this conversation actually did occur between Governor Scott and the governor of Massachusetts to sort of talk through those scenarios of what would occur if an individual state on the Avenue of the States elected not to attend or not to participate in 2020.
As you know, we canceled the Champlain Valley Expo. We made that decision. Even though maybe it could have happened, the fear is that you're not going to have the amount of people attending. You know, a lot of folks are going to stay away from those events. It all depends how much it costs you to put on. So with our decision, it was a financial decision, but of course, you're with all the other states. It's tough, but a lot of people are not going to attend any function with a lot of folks around this year. It's a big change.
I read an article that talked about vendors not participating this year and the amount of money that the fair will be losing. So that goes to what Senator Mazza is saying about people who are participating as well.
Yeah, very appropriate conversations that we and our staff and that Lauren is experiencing and considering with vendors. So I think last year, 2019, revenue generation from the Big E was 1.8 million from Vermont vendors, or somewhere in that range. And that's with, almost 2 million people coming through the event. The state then takes a commission of 12% off that, which then is how we sort of help support and fund part of the operational aspects of the event, pay part of our staff, et cetera. And there have been conversations about a reduction of visitors, as well as some vendors being uncomfortable to participate and attend.
Right. That's what we found,
Yeah, and then there's additional restrictions and expectations that are on the states to be open during the Big E that will be more expensive, more time consuming, and more complicated, frankly, for states to participate.
So the reason that you were invited here is we had the question, are you going to be open? That question came about because the governor's recommend was 200,000. The House decided to put in an additional 80,000. And I'm wondering what it is that the increase was for.
Yeah, and so this is where Eric Philcorn or others from BGS may be in the best position to sort of respond to that, since that appropriation actually goes to BGS as opposed to the agency at this point. We've done it both ways, and last year made the selection to have the funds go directly to BGS. But my understanding, and again, Lauren could also pipe in, that as we look at the deferred maintenance on this nearly 100-year-old building, the need for both electrical work, roof work, other facility modifications and upgrades, it doesn't change whether the building is open and the Big E occurs in 2020. Frankly, if the event doesn't occur, we may have more opportunity and timing to get more of the major maintenance needs completed on the building, if we're not having to wait for 2.5 weeks for the public to clear out. So I think the BGS did share with us some of the budget projections, and again, others may have more detail that they want to share, but looking at the electrical needs in the building to come up to code requirements would be somewhere in the range of over $200,000. Structural repairs are also significant, as well as doing some exterior building repair. So thinking that even just in the next few months, I think BGS is anticipating $185,000 in bid responses related to the building coming in. Anything that I stated, Lauren, that's inaccurate from your knowledge of the building and the long-term plan for maintenance?
The only other two items would be that the Lawrence Area Agency of Agriculture, the electrical work and the structural work, it's recommended that we do that prior to the fairs. So that work is definitely not going to go away, but needs to happen before we can actually occupy the building.
From a health and safety kind of standpoint.
So
Committee?
what would be left if the electrical work and the structural work is done? What would be left to, what would you need after that?
There's always something every year, you know, it's maintenance, you know, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
So I
Good
think
question.
this is where we may want to ask BGS to talk a little bit more about those numbers. But what's on the list here is an exterior design study and then other exterior maintenance, which includes the windows, the doors, the bricks, the balconies. A lot of those are safety requirements.
So you were talking about other needs this year because of COVID. So there will have to be additional cleaning, probably more people working and doing that on a regular basis. Possibly PPE available. I don't know whether that would happen or not. So two questions here. One, will there be a requirement to go into the building using a mask? And then the second question is there any money available from maybe the USDA through the CRF, the relief funds, that would support some of the extra work that's going on?
Good question, Senator. I do know that there will be some likely operational changes at the Big E if it were to operate this year. One big kind of anticipated cost to the states was that we will be responsible for managing the capacity within the building. So we don't typically have staff stationed at both entrances and exits to keep the flow through the building. It's usually pretty jam-packed if you have been there before. And that's not likely to be the kind of occupancy that's acceptable during COVID times. So whether masks will be required, again, I don't know, Lauren, if that conversation has come up with the Big E as to whether that's a Massachusetts decision or an individual state decision.
Yeah, so the state and the town will have expectations and guidelines that we will be expected to follow. And then we can go above and beyond those guidelines, but do not necessarily, we can't go below them. So we have kind of a drafted list of what our guidelines would look like, but as things change and as Massachusetts enters the different phases, we'll really be looking to them to kind of get a sense of what's required at that time. And we are looking still at another 3 or 3.5 months. So we haven't made anything final or formal at this point.
Any other questions?
Is there a kind of cutoff date? I mean, that they're going to make a decision by?
We would love a cutoff date, but no, right now there is not.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's another one of those difficult decisions. I know Senator Mazza, it must have been hard for Champlain Valley to decide to not be operational, as well as for all other failed fairs and field days this year.
And we had booked a lot of shows, so
Yeah.
we had to refund the money. And we had another meeting last night, and it's just, wow, and then we can't book any other shows because we do a lot of agriculture shows, car shows. We had to cancel all those, so it's yeah, it's hurt. I don't know how the other fairs are going to survive either in Vermont. The smaller fairs are going to be very difficult because it's going to be a whole year gone. So
Yeah.
And that kind of begs the question, is there any of the Corona relief funds that are available for,
well, everybody's looking into
Situations
that.
like
I
that.
mean, it all depends on what they apply for and how you apply for it, and everybody's looking for that sort of money, but there's only so much of it out there.
Yeah, I think,
You know, so my ignorance is going to show, but what taxes do we pay to Massachusetts for Big E? And then in our state, what taxes are the fairs paying to the state right now without operation? I mean, property taxes going into local communities is one. Obviously, sales taxes would be another, but just in terms of property tax stuff, is there anything there?
That's a good question. So
I don't know.
yeah, I actually am not sure. We own the land outright. So
Yeah,
yeah, I would imagine we pay property tax, but I'm not sure.
yeah.
The only
Okay.
silver lining to all of these fairs being closed is that none of us politicians have to spend a whole lot of time there waving at people and kissing babies and all that stuff.
Your 3 weekends in the end of September may now be free. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. I
right.
believe you've answered the question. The Big
Great.
E is on for now.
So we're happy to certainly communicate when and if that kind of notification changes.
Thank you very
In the
much.
next, if
Appreciate
we
that.
happen to have it while you're still here or when you're back. So we'll let you
Say hello
know.
to Anson.
I will, of course.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks.
all right, Joe. I gotta be back.
Last up on the agenda, Joe Aja, I think you're out there somewhere. Hi
Yes,
there.
I'm out here, Senator.
I have this really cantankerous chair of Senate Agriculture who insists he doesn't want to live in his broom closet anymore. And I am aware from conversation elsewhere that this may not necessarily be the year to be talking about that. But I'm trying to keep it on the agenda because at some point we've got to build him a bigger room. And right now we have nothing on the radar screen that indicates, other than our committee discussion, there's nothing in the bill that indicates this is going to be something that's happening. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the other conversations going on about how, if, and when we all collectively get back into the State House. I understand those conversations are fairly deep and haven't yet been introduced to the public at large, so I'm not going to bring them up here. But I want to keep Senator Starr's request on our radar screen, and I'm trying to figure out how we can do that. That's why you're here.
Okay.
Have I stumped you?
Somehow you're muted.
All right, there we go.
There you go.
We had Freeman French Freeman completed a study, and I believe we presented that to you earlier in the year. And as you know, the State House is very tight for space. So it's really about picking a location or one of these options that have been put forth and going from there. Some of them are relatively inexpensive. Some of them are quite expensive and will take some time to both design and construct. And right now, option or diagram D, I think if you remember from the study, had quite a few different things, but it was really looking at using the Ethan Allen room for a committee room for the Senate. Right now, the House is squatted in there. And so that one, if you went in there, had minor renovations, I want to say $3,200, $3,300 or something like that to fit that up to a committee room. But that would mean that the House has to go back to the third floor.
That ain't gonna happen.
Well,
It's very diplomatic of you to use the word squatting. I think there's a hostile takeover.
Yeah.
well, I can go out on a
The
limb and
simplest
say
one
there's
is
a
the cloakroom.
vacancy. There's a vacancy
Simplest
on the
one's the
third.
cloakroom. That's
Yes.
the one. That's the one. You take the mail room out, you put a wall, and the mail room wants to go back to the sergeant of arms. They want to deliver the mail. You put a wall, and he has a committee room, and you have a cloakroom. I don't know, that was right, Joe? We had talked about that.
We had talked about it as a committee, but we never got into anything more concrete than just having that conversation.
You wouldn't have to put another door, nothing. One door to go in, and that's it.
And I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head whether Freeman French had that as potential target area.
They did
Well,
locate the sergeant of arms into the
No,
courtroom.
No, just the agricultural
Oh, sorry.
committee being moved into the mailroom, leaving a space for coats, but moving the agricultural committee over to the window to enable them to have their private space with a window was what we were looking at and talking about.
Right. The
And
mail
it
room
never
would
got
go
any
inside.
further. So what do you think about
They
that? And
won't-
how can we look into it?
What would you use for dividing wall?
Well, that's up to the magical construction people at
Right.
BGS.
Well, then the discussions have been around looking at glass because historic preservation people really like the glass is the least obtrusive to put up on a wall like that. We also have to investigate the air handling system for that. So Freeman French Freeman did show that, but they split that room with Capitol Police and the Sergeant of Arms. So if you're looking to sort of
No. The sergeant of arms stayed where they were. They were going to the pages want to deliver the mail because they don't have enough to do. The mail room would be gone. You'd be one wall down, the cloakroom as you walk in the main door, so you wouldn't have to put another door in there. When you walk in the cloakroom, there was a door to go into Bobby Starr's committee. That was it. It didn't seem like a very involved deal. For one wall inside, because you weren't going to touch the historical society on the outside in the hallway. We weren't going to touch that with a door.
But you would have to do a glass wall.
Why
on
glass on the
interior with
inside?
what type of wall? Because historic people like the glass wall so that they can still see the finishes.
So, but then there'd have to be a curtain up or something. You'd have to have
glass
some,
wall.
you kind of have to, it can't be open all the time. You're gonna have to have either a shade or a curtain or blind,
Glass wall. I think we'd break that
yeah.
pretty easy. I don't know.
No, they make glass pretty good these days.
Plexiglass.
It's certainly open for discussion as to, yes, we can put a wall in that room. As to what type that wall is, certainly glass is more expensive than just regular sheetrock or plaster. I don't recall the ornate cornice in that room, if there has one at all, and exactly where the division goes and how the HVAC system would work. But we'd have to look into that. Looking at what Freeman French Freeman did propose, they were looking at roughly 120,000 to divide that room up. So we would probably be in that ballpark. It's not something that we're going to have done by this December, though. For the
One
next,
wall for $120,000. I can't hear you.
Really along the lines of that
wall.
latrine down in Bennington, I think.
not that bad, not
right.
as bad as the latrine. I'm not putting a whole addition on,
Gosh.
but it does. You have HVAC. You
Well,
want to be
HVAC in the whole building is terrible. So what difference is going to make in that room? None of us can breathe in our rooms now. So what the
Well,
hell?
but that, if you have the cloakroom in there still, you're gonna have to have a little bit better circulation because you're gonna bring in rain and snow and lots of people, so.
I think you may have a
Yeah.
sound issue too with the people in there bringing their coats in.
Well, I wouldn't worry about that. You know why? You can put a sign up that says quiet, you know, the ag committee chair will be very careful about letting people know when they're disrupting his meetings.
Just like Peg did.
Yeah.
Joe, I want to get one thing out of this conversation today, and that is, at least if I can convince you to reach out to Senator Starr and tell him that the Senate Institutions Committee is interested in pursuing something for him, and just float the idea that we had this thought about him going into that room. I know we can't do anything this year. We can't do anything in the Capitol bill this year. And you folks are all wrapped up as we are with COVID-19. But I'd like to be able to give him the feeling that we are continuing the conversation.
To continue that conversation, if he is positive about a potential space in there, the direction from you would be to at least for BGS to investigate that space and at
That's
least
right.
come up with some programming and schematic design. I probably
Yes.
wouldn't be a lot of money, but I could get that far to let you know further what the wall types would be, what the HV system would have to be.
Okay, that would be wonderful. That's the only thing I'm looking for in this conversation right now.
Okay.
Appreciate you coming. Anybody else have any questions?
No.
Okay,
Okay.
so Eric, pre-CBS pickups or post-CBS pickups?
These, when I got this, it had I think a Bill Lawrence here on the front, and I've gone back to a stock, but it was a stock pickup that I bought 10 years ago. So this is like a 1978. It's nothing terribly special, but it's been in my life for a long time.
Good
It changed
for you.
out the pick guard a couple of years ago just to
Yeah.
gussy it up a bit.
Good for you. Okay, guys. I don't know if anybody has anything else to talk about. We're gonna come back on Friday, and I would really like, if we can do it at all possible, have whatever discussion is necessary and take a vote on the bill. Just for the committee's edification, I got a phone call yesterday. It seems that there has been work going on behind the scenes to locate a sum of money in the range of about $730 to $50. And that money is from other places that contracts have already gone through, work has been done. And lo and behold, there's a number of those that didn't spend all the money they had. And now we might have money to reallocate in that wonderful number that just happens to match what we might have been in a big knockdown drag out over. So the
Sounds
long and the
good.
short of it is I'm waiting for the list and I'm waiting for confirmation that the money is there. But if that is the case, hopefully Friday we can take another look and find out if anybody's objecting to anything that the House has done. If not, I'm not sure what else we can possibly do because we've heard all the testimony associated with the bill. I'd like to have a discussion and see if we can't vote it.
I just
Okay.
wanted to say that I talked with Representative Emmons about the Hoff renaming or the renaming of the building. And of course, they have concerns. I'm wondering if there might be a way to sort of alleviate her concerns, which were that we should have a plan if we're going to be naming buildings in the Capitol complex, that there should be a plan. And I just wondered if there would be a way of sort of starting off this process with naming that building with the intention of developing a more robust plan for what happens in the future as far as naming buildings. So just a heads up, that's what.
Yeah. Years ago, we used to have the libraries used to do it. Now all of a sudden it's back in the legislative hands, and that's dangerous. That's dangerous. We got to find a formula because once you start this process, everybody's going to want things named to the legislature. And that's a tough one. There should be some committee assigned to that from outside the legislature, not political, that reviews these things because it worked for years. All of a sudden, a couple of years ago, the libraries gave it up and it fell back on us. And now we're naming bridges and we're going to name roads and things like that. That's pretty dangerous, I think. But
The Mazza Plaza.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you got to be careful how you go down this road.
I don't disagree with you at all, Dick. And in making a response to that comment, developing a plan is nothing that's going to happen between now and Friday.
No,
that's one
certainly
thing
not,
to be
but-
considering in this particular situation. Do you want to scuttle the naming of the building in favor of developing a plan first, because I don't know how we're going to resolve getting a plan. I'm agnostic. I'll go either way with wherever the committee wants to go on it. But that's one thing you have to consider. I just don't know how we're going to come up with a plan that's going to work that will also satisfy the other committee on the other side.
I
Not
don't
within the
think
timeframe.
that there was an expectation that a plan would be developed, but that there would be a plan to have a plan or something to that
Got it.
effect.
A discussion. So, yeah, somebody's gonna be bringing back a way to do it.
Okay, I'm hoping whoever had the language with Becky is going to be able to produce that. And maybe if one of you want to take
Yeah.
on the role of asking Becky to plan a plan as
sent-
part of that legislation, that may be a way to go.
I already sent the committee the language from Becky.
Yeah.
FYI.
Thank you, Peggy.
Yeah, you got it. So
Okay, I gotta go do my income taxes.
it's about
Again?
time.
So you
All
can get your
right, we'll see you
stimulus
guys
check.
tomorrow. That will officially conclude the meeting of the Institutions Committee. But if one of you guys could take a look at that and make sure Becky is on top of saying something to the effect, we are going to have a study to have a plan or whatever the case may be, do a plan to plan. Otherwise, we're going to miss getting this into the bill, I'm sure.
Let me
Okay.
ask a question about that real quickly, because I know Cheryl has been doing a lot of the footwork on this. Would it, do you think, be appropriate to ask Ledge Council to work in consultation with BGS and the library, something like that, to come up with a proposal? Eric didn't like that. but,
Oh,
no,
I smelled more work. That's all.
I know, I'm happy to take you out of it, but
And can I just ask why libraries gave it up or were taken
well,
out of it?
just because they have done it in the past, they have a,
No,
they have a
but why
tradition.
did they, why are they not doing it anymore?
I don't know. Probably got to be too much of a burden. I don't know.
Too controversial.
Maybe they got tired of saying no to people.
Mm,
Hard.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
Well, I'll check with Becky to have her put some language in that shows that we're going to continue this discussion, but I wondered if there could be a way to affect this change and then move on, but we'll see.
I'm with you on that. Okay.
Okay, good luck.
Thanks.
all right.
Thanks for coming. We'll
Thank
see you
you.
all tomorrow.
Bye.
Thank you,
Take
Peggy.
care.
So long, folks.